Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome to Insurance for the New Possible, a Chubb conversation. I'm joined by Sean Ringsted, the Chief Digital Business Officer for Chubb, and Hugh Terry, the CEO and founder of the Digital Insurer. And before we jump into the central part of our conversation, let's get a bit of each of your backgrounds for some context. Hugh, let's start with you.
Yeah, hi, Michael. Hi, Sean. It's great to be here on a rainy Friday here in Singapore, as it is usually. I guess my background, I'm proud to be a triple geek, right? Deep on insurance, in the actuarial profession, and obviously the last 20 years got more and more into digital as well. And I think what I've seen is work within the insurance industry, worked in a startup during the dot-com era, and now I guess more as a commentator, dare I say it, a little bit academic in terms of outside in and insights on all things digital insurance. So it's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to this topic.
Sean?
Great, good afternoon. Yeah, it's good to be here with you both. It's rainy, but it's warm in Singapore, so that's always good. My background, a little bit of a triple geek, as maybe.
I love it.
Got a background in biochemistry, background in actuarial, and been in the insurance industry for over 25 years now, which is quite surprising to me, and just love it. It's been fantastic. And during that journey, I've worked in different markets, different product sets, and sort of increasingly drawn to how you can use analytics and technology to deliver a proposition that's really interesting. So digital came along at the right time for me.
But do you think, just based on your experience of all your time in the insurance industry, that we're at an inflection point? If you look at the development of technology over the entire time that you've been there, do you feel like, now this is a really big change? And can you feel it?
You can feel it. You can feel the components, I think. I mean, technology, yes, absolutely, right? I mean, you can do things that are extraordinary with technology, right? The availability of data it's everywhere. And then how people live by, it's all driven through technology. So you can see all of that coming together. I don't know if we're at a tipping point, and you want the pace of change to be quicker.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
I do. I mean, if you look at the actual product and the proposition we give to customers, it's changed, but hasn't really changed, right, in the way that you think it could with technology. And I think that's what makes it all so exciting, right?
I think so.
We're at this cusp, right? And it could either go on the current path, or it could just exponentially just take off.
What's your view, Hugh, on this, whether it's going to go exponentially and take off?
I think it already has, but you're still at the sort of early pace of
this
this exponential curve, And my fellow founder, Simon Phipps, likes to say sort of today is the slowest rate of change you're ever going to see. I really believe that. I think obviously our lives have been fundamentally changed over the last 20 years through the adoption of technology. Insurance industry always is a laggard in terms of that. But actually, when you look about what has happened over the last 5 years, there's been a sea change in opinions, if not quite yet fully developed, as Sean was saying. So it's a really exciting time. And I think for most people who have been in insurance for a long time, this is possibly the best time we've seen in our careers, right? And it's actually a chance to get back to fundamentals, right? How can we actually use digital to re-engage with customers is, I think, a strong motivation factor for many people.
But do you think this is like one of the biggest trends in insurance and insurtech, this rethinking of the way the fundamentals work based on the availability of technology and of data?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of rethinking. You're still constraints, obvious in terms of, first and foremost, you have regulation, right? And so that does act as a brake. But if you fundamentally look at the proposition, these are all good things for the customer, right?
It feels like it.
It's all good. So I'm an optimist in that regard, right? The conversation with the regulator should be a positive one.
I think so.
I'm making product available in different ways to customers who couldn't reach or access insurance. That's a good thing. I can now solve different problems better. That's a good thing. So I'm optimistic about regulation. I do think you still, with traditional customer buying behavior, right? The idea that if I'm running a business, right, to be able to walk down the street and talk to an agent and he'll take care of it, right? That's appealing. So you do have to change that proposition. But the more you can convince the customer, right, the potential customer, right, of the value in buying, a product digitally, accessing services digitally, and importantly, having the claim fulfillment done digitally, right? I think, and so many other transactions, habits, etc., are going online. I just have to think insurance is going to go that way.
Do you reference ideas you had when earlier in your career where you thought, if I could just do this? This is the reason why I ask about this is because I had this when I was at Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. There were so many things that I wanted to do, but the technology that we had at the time didn't allow us to do it. There were also regulatory issues that we had as well. Yeah. But I'm curious if you now move into this era where there's so much data available, right? Where the cloud is there so that it's everywhere at the same time, and that the throughput that you have for just transmitting information back and forth is so much faster, where you feel like that idea that I had 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I can now do now. And maybe that's why you said you like to jump into this digital side of the business. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm not sure I was sort of smart enough or had enough sort of foresight 10 years ago or 20 years ago, right, to imagine what you can do today with technology. I mean, the notion that you can have a supercomputer, right, in your hand,
in your pocket,
your pocket, right, for $1,000, 10, 20 years ago, we never imagined. No. I mean, for sure, right, you said, look, if I had more data, right, if I could understand this better.
But also if I could analyze the data faster.
Yeah, right.
And have it everywhere. Right?
Yeah, then
I'm in London now, I can't get that stuff, it's in New York kind of thing.
Yeah, then I can do things better. Of course you imagine that, but not in ways that you can see today. I mean, the potential is extraordinary, I think.
Yeah. Something that you talk about a lot, the power of platforms and ecosystems. Do you think technology has enabled this? And if it has, how has it changed the way over time you've looked at insurance at scale as an industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, our topic is megatrends, right?
Yeah.
And you were asking, well, what comes after embedded insurance? In many respects, what comes as part of embedded insurance and what comes after embedded insurance is ecosystems and platforms, right? And these are the key drivers. And clearly, technology is allowing so many different ecosystems to come up, whether you're looking at super apps, whether you're looking at sort of embedding travel insurance within someone's flight ecosystem, but also down at the personal level of how people are connecting to each other increasingly online, are creating more and more ecosystems. So this is the key driver through which consumers are being orientated. And of course, for insurance as a fundamental right, when we get back to fundamentals, it's a secondary purchase. Right? You don't wake up and say, I'm going to go and buy some insurance. You buy something or you have a need that then gets you to buy insurance. So what we're doing with ecosystems is essentially putting ourselves in the place where that secondary purchase is convenient for the customer and logical, right? So you say, okay, I bought a car secondhand, I'll get my car insurance at the same time. I'm traveling, I'll get my flight insurance at the same time as well.
What do you think?
Yeah, total agreement there on platforms and ecosystems is that's going to supercharge a lot of change and a lot of value. I still have my eye on embedded insurance because when you say what comes after, I'm thinking, well, we haven't really started. I mean, you mentioned travel, but that's such a small part, right, of the insurance opportunity set, and there are still a number of transaction points, right, that have not digitized yet. I remember before Christmas buying a car in the States, and I did everything online.
For the car?
For the research, the price points, where to go, call the dealer up, and I said I'm going to be there at 2:00 to pick up the car, and I thought I'm just going to drive out of the lot, right? And it took 2.5 hours to complete all the paperwork.
Really?
Yeah, with the dealer, with the loyalty program, et cetera, and then the cherry on the cake was they had to get it notarized, right? So I had to come in and sign it. But if you look at just buying a car, right. If you look at the healthcare system, right? So much of our world today is still fragmented. It's not digitized. It's manual. So and insurance is part of that journey. We go right alongside those transaction paths. So there's still, I think, ways to go in terms of actually delivering embedded insurance propositions that are relevant to customers.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with Sean here, but I'm also going to put a little bit of a challenge, maybe, if I can here. So
go for it.
Absolutely, I think there's lots we've got to go on embedded insurance, and one of the sort of most memorable things for me, when we set up the digital insurer, we ran our first we only did 2 physical events ever. The first was in 2016, and it was at KPMG offices in Hong Kong, and we had presenting there Zhong Ang, and Zhong Ang was talking about having sold 1 billion insurance policies for its refund insurance, and the gasp in the audience then was just, my God, how has this company sold 1 billion digital micro insurance policies, right? And of course we've seen this sort of unfold in Asia, with many organizations like that. I think that's really good. I think the challenge I have around this is, for me, it feels like an entry product, right? And it feels like it's marginally profitable, if profitable at all. And then the big question is where do we go after that? How do we develop a relationship with a customer? And then we get on to one of my favourite topics, which has always been looking through digital back to the human touch, right? And actually, I think that, for me, is the key driver in the industrial revolution that we're seeing, is we've got to reinvent our human touch.
What does that mean, though?
It means that we can't do things, if you're digital first, which we used to be able to do. So we've got to think through how we actually engage with customers. So instead of thinking of digital-only transactions, we almost have to start thinking about how desperate we are to talk to people, because we want them to call us up because they're dealing with a complex product. And if we're going to get to higher margin products with higher premium, we need to be talking to those customers so they can understand what they're buying as well. So that's quite an important point.
Right. So I have this view on this hybrid relationship, right, that people want to have with the people that are serving them, right? From a very, you said you did all the research online, but at some point it gets confusing, right? You have questions, whether it's insurance or even just buying a car. Can I get these hubcaps in that color? Can I really? Because it's not clear to me that that's possible. And for me, at least, I want to make the phone call, right? Like we were joking before we started recording about the flight, right? Should I call them and see?
Yeah.
Well, you can ask a chatbot, but maybe that chatbot doesn't have all the information, right? It can do some of the basic stuff. But what's your view on this hybrid relationship, right? Where the hybrid is where the power is. I feel comfortable getting this bit of information, but now I want to talk to Maria about whether I'm really sure about this or not. What do you think?
How much time do we have? Look, I completely agree with Hugh's comment and your comment. You are going to have a hybrid model. I think it depends upon the product and the context and people's comfort level with the product.
Yeah.
Right. And often when people are making a financial transaction, it's almost they want affirmation from somebody to saying, yes, you're right. You're making
this is the right choice.
This is the right choice for you. And I think for insurance, really the proposition is the claims, right? That claims payment. So the sales, the premium, fine. But where we really come through, and certainly at Chubb, is on the claims side, and there you do need a human touch often, right? Because it's a traumatic moment, and yes, you can fulfill a travel claim parametrically, etc. But when you think about whether it's sort of accident, health, or even to sort of a hurricane or somebody making a claim because of a bereavement. Very hard to do that contextually with a robot at the moment. Maybe it's going to come. So you do have to be mindful, right, of the hybrid mixed model. I agree with that.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I think we're not yet fully addressing this, and I think this will come more and more into focus as you see the sort of landscape changing. I mean, I think we're very positive, right, about agency models, bank assurance models. So we see sort of platform and ecosystems as a third leg, if you like. But actually ecosystems affect the way that face-to-face models are delivered as well.
But it's going to have to, right? I mean, these ecosystems are going to have to affect it at scale, because ecosystem by definition means that there are multiple players. And some of those multiple players may actually be competitors in some cases, right? But that ecosystem growth is something that I don't think we can stop. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like it's going to keep happening. Open banking, open finance, open insurance, open data is going to change the way that not just we interact with the people that are serving us, but with the way those providers also interact with each other.
Yeah, and look at the opportunity that creates. So you talk about a simple insurance product, and we talk about embedded.
Right.
And first things first, right? We'll expand on the embedded, but what you see after embedded, I think, gets really interesting. We think about it as a sort of a symbiotic proposition. You take a step back. I mean, insurance is. I love insurance. I mean, insurance is so cool, right? It's the oil, right, that makes the engine go for the economy, right? Where we have to be in all these ecosystems anyway, otherwise things don't work. Now you have these digital ecosystems, and now you think about what you can create that brings benefit to not only to the partner in the ecosystem and their customers, but to ourselves, right? You can start to create products that create value for both that didn't exist before, and I think that's where it's going to get really interesting.
Maybe you can define what you mean by ecosystem.
I think there's so many different. It's better to do it by examples.
Yes, exactly.
Right, where you can actually point to examples. I think it's where at one level you could look at, say, Grab, which has started out with taxi riding, developed a payment platform off the back of that,
GrabPay.
And then has loyal customers who like the convenience of accessing that app, and then they're able to move into a wider range of products and services as one example of an ecosystem. But I think you can also have very, very small ecosystems. So you could have, for example, a health and wellness group that might look at, say, mothers who are going through childbirth, and it might be a maternity community, and that in itself is an ecosystem that might need insurance at some point in time as well. So the really interesting thing is there's small ecosystems, there's large ecosystems, there's ecosystems that insurers can create themselves that they can then use as competitive advantage to get into larger ecosystems. So this world of ecosystems and how they're actually going to cooperate with each other is all starting to come into place because the technology is there to enable this and make it easier for people to connect than it's ever been, whether it's personally or for business.
Or for business, right? Can we talk a little bit more about embedded, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Because you also mentioned this word fragmentation before,
right.
And I just want to dig a little bit deeper on this. In the old days, if I went to shop for something, in a way I was shopping in a vacuum, right? I was shopping by myself. Even if you came in the next day and bought the same product, we don't know each other, so we're not connected to each other, right? But now, if I buy something on some online platform, right, we all know the names of the big ones. It doesn't really matter. But they know that you and I are buying the same product. They may know that you and I are the same age. They may know that we're using a similar credit card. So to them, we look similar, which means then that they can put all that information together. It's less fragmented from an individual standpoint. And then they can sell embedded insurance around that. Is that the way this is working?
It's one way it could work.
Go ahead.
But going back to Hugh's description of the ecosystem, it's all driven by the connectivity, which is why I'm bringing this up. Go ahead. Yeah, which is helping with the fragmentation. I mean, take another example of the ecosystem. Think about the healthcare.
Go ahead.
System. Think about hospitals.
Right.
Think about.
I know.
Right.
No, but I talk about. Do you mind?
In a good way.
Yeah, I do. But I talk about this all the time. If I go into my hospital, right, so B&H, on this side street in Bangkok, and I get unbelievable service there, but I still have to fill out forms, lots of forms, right? Yeah. But then if I go 2 weeks later to another hospital really close to them, I have to go through the same process all over again.
Right. And this is where I'm going, and this is why I think we're at the beginning of embedded. Because you've still got that fragmentation,
yes.
But what the connectivity and the digital ecosystem is going to offer, say on the healthcare system, you think pharmacies, you think doctors, you think hospitals,
right.
You think care providers, yep. You think preventative services, you think wellness, and you think of the role the insurance plays in all of that. And you as an entry point, you come in, Michael, as a customer. Hopefully you have a Chubb policy. That'll allow you to access that healthcare, but think of all those touch points that right along that.
Right, you mentioned 6 or 7 of them already, right?
Right, which I think is extraordinary, right? And it setting aside we don't have to do multiple entry of your name, which I think is fairly basic. But being able to get preventative healthcare to you at the right point in time, having my dream would be I'm going into the hospital. I cross there, instantly knows, right, that I've got the coverage, right, that it's got a policy of my operation.
Because you have it, when you walk in, right, you're confident about it, but there's somebody behind a counter, you give them a card, you do some kind of transaction with them, and they're like, let me just check to make sure.
Yeah, but they wouldn't even have to know.
Right.
And you walk in and you have your operation, hopefully it's, a pleasant experience. And you walk out of the hospital again, and guess what, right, that insurance payment is sitting on your phone in your digital wallet, right? And so it's no longer just a simple transactional product or you've now created this experience, right, that runs all the way through, right? And you get in your car, and then you're going to get notifications about what care you should be taking afterwards, right, to make sure you stay healthy or recover. And that's just one ecosystem, right? Healthcare, right? Now imagine others as well. So this is where, if we can do this, is where it's going to get exponential.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might end up going too deep on health, but let's go with the
no, it's a good example because it's so real.
Yeah, right. And I've been saying for quite a number of years, and it's obvious now that anyone who's even in the life insurance business has to consider the health ecosystems that are emerging, because they're fundamentally changing the nature of the data that you're getting. But actually, even more than that, you start thinking about what does your customer really want, right? And this is where it comes down to ecosystems that insurers can build, because insurers can't build the whole healthcare ecosystem themselves.
Well, nobody can. Right? That's the whole point of it, right?
So then what should an insurer be looking to build? Well, then you start thinking about, in that instance of healthcare, well, what does the honest customer want? Do you want to make a claim? Do you want to make a claim? No, they don't want to make a claim, right? So actually the first thing they want is advice to help them to live healthier lives, to avoid claims. So if you can help people to avoid risks and manage risks better, you're into a winning customer proposition, which is better than paying the claim. If you do both, then you've got a customer for life, right? And I think that's where we're starting to see, and we've got great examples in Asia where this is really coming through very, very strongly. It's really exciting, right? Because it moves the product into something the consumer wants, and it helps consumers to have better outcomes as well.
I totally agree, and it's not just the consumer, because now it's in the sort of the healthcare, right? And so everybody's sort of interests are aligned in that way, right? Because you want to contain healthcare costs, more efficient service, right? So for the hospitals, for the city here or the country, being able to reduce costs in that way, because you've now got this integrated, embedded type experiences, I think is really beneficial.
So what role does data, because all of these things, right, to create this frictionless environment where you walk into a hospital where nobody needs to know anything about you, right? There's nobody at the desk doing this and checking on things. It requires a bunch of different things, but two things that come to mind is a ton of data, first of all, right? So we can talk about what the power of data is in building these ecosystems and maintaining them. And the second thing is there has to be this sort of, for lack of a better term, embedded trust built into the whole system. Because just to get back to your flight that we were joking about before we started recording,
right?
You're like, is it really there? Does it really think? No, but you know what I mean, right? And you have now a little bit of unease. You're like, let me just make a phone call. And if I talk to somebody on the phone and that gentleman or that lady tells them, yep, your flight's leaving at 11:30 tonight, no worries, whatever it is, you'll feel like, okay, I'm fine. But if it's just like a chatbot telling you, for me at least, there's still a little bit of an unease. How do you build this? Let's deal with this first, right? How do you build this trust into the digital ecosystem, which is different than me looking into your eyes saying, I'm okay, yeah?
Well, if it's going to give me a better experience, right? So you got choice. I mean, saying, do you opt in or opt out or consent or regulation? But if I take the current experience on the table, right, for healthcare, if I took the current experience that I described for buying a car, right, on the table, versus, well, if you consented to give your data, and I've already given my data on a piece of paper, right, that I don't trust, right? They mix it up and get my name spelled wrong, right? Or sorry, did you tick that you had a heart condition? Oh, sorry, but I'm probably better off with digital data for me. I would prefer that, particularly if it's going to give me a better experience.
trust, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, it is our industry, right? It is the industry which requires the most trust. So I think when you move into a digital space, you actually have to think about it more. So previously we could take it for granted a little bit.
In a way, right?
You'd have people who would be able to explain, answer questions, develop trust. So people won't come into that first engagement with anyone with trust, right? So they're going to come very cautiously into that. So you kind of have to build trust into every layer that you've got. So your customer engagement almost has to think almost like a trust audit, right? How am I building trust with the customer throughout all of that customer journey? What's my security infrastructure like? Am I doing the right thing for my customers? Are my products well designed?
Data protection.
Got appropriate payouts and all of those things. And I think that's what makes insurance so complicated, but ultimately really quite interesting. And I think we'll see this issue of trust come back time and time again. And if we get that right, we're going to have really, really much, much happier customers as well. And I'm not saying we've done things wrong. We've done some things wrong in the bad, but I think it's just a great opportunity when you move in a digital world to rethink a lot of things that have previously been kind of taken for granted a little bit.
Yeah, but I think people like, what am I going to get in exchange, right? I mean, I think people are, on the one hand, they're unaware of the data that they're giving. I mean, if you look at the location services on your phone or sort of other examples,
understand this at all.
I don't understand, or people don't care, right? You become so used to giving data in that way. To like, if I am being asked to give my data, I think people are very, especially sort of younger generation, are like, well, what am I going to get in exchange for that, right? I will give you my data if I'm going to be able to either monetize it or get a better experience, or access to products in a way. And I think there's a willingness to give data. So if the question then, Michael, is from a customer point of view, right, I think progressively you're seeing, now that said, right, you've got this trend of, are there other ways that you can put, given the power of that data, can you put that back into the hands of the individual, right? So,
can I just tell an interesting trust story from my perspective, right? And this is going to date me a little bit, but I remember when Amazon first launched internationally, right? So I could buy a book and I could send it to where I was working in Japan. And I called them because I didn't trust actually ordering the book online, and they had a phone number, so I did that. This is true. And the other reason why I wanted to call them was because I didn't want to put my credit card into that little field that they had there. But I want you to think about this at scale, because I was super okay with getting on the phone and talking to some person I did not know at all, and having that person probably just do the same thing. But you understand?
But you felt better because you spoke to somebody.
I felt better because I spoke to somebody. But that person was just as likely to write my number down over here.
Right.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is this thing changes at the point of what develops good trust and what doesn't. It's changed over time.
That's why I'm talking about this.
Yeah, so for example, you'd have said in your example, you were probably okay with the idea that you might give your credit card up front, and a lot of companies try to do this on free trials, or used to, right? But consumers don't like it.
No, I don't like it at all.
So you see that has gone away. If you took a look at insurance, there used to be a lot of aggregators that would say, before I'll give you the price comparison, you have to give me your email and telephone number, all of that sort of stuff. And that's gone away because it didn't actually lead to trust. And the smart way, of course, would be to say to a customer, I've got your quote, here it is in front of you. You can go online and purchase, but by the way, if you'd like to have a nice little report and you want to consider this and come back to it later, just give me your email, right? And then that's the value exchange that you were talking about earlier, and that's a trust building exercise. And I think that's the thing. If we come back to that, we won't go too far wrong in terms of just your point. What is the value exchange? Are we definitely delivering something of value to the consumer that they want to share the data? And then once we've got that data, how do we correspond with that customer and then give them value through communications?
Yeah, right? And I that's great. And I think I totally agree with that. And I think it's an important point on that. Right? Once you've got the data, what do you do with it? What do you do with it then? Because you don't want to be... You want to be careful and respectful how you use that data. If I hand over my data, I don't expect to get like a robocall at 9:00 that night saying, "Do you want to buy a critical illness cover?" Right?
Please no.
And and to me, maybe it's sort of personal. This idea that, and I see it a lot, read it a lot. This idea that there are touch points, right? Or insurance, right? You pay a premium, and that's the only touch point. And maybe I get a claim. So maybe there's 2 touch points in in a year, right? So insurers need to sort of be in touch and connect with their customers. And so using that data to do that, I think is questionable, because I'm not sure I want to get approached or contacted by my insurer every day. Now, if she's going to provide something that's useful and relevant, right? Hey, there's a storm coming, right?
Right.
Or if I bought a cyber product, you know your iOS is out of date. You should upgrade. I got it. So I think, you know, back to what Hugh was saying in terms of once you've got that data, being respectful how you use it subsequently, I think is very important.
Yeah, and in there, I think there are lots of opportunities to build relationships with customers, and I think that's where
in a thoughtful way.
Yeah, like, you know, you could say just after someone's bought a policy, send them an interactive policy, right, that helps them to actually understand and reaffirm why they've purchased, and then if you need a claim, you need where to go to. All of those things can also be done to build that trust, I think, as well. And I can still get back to the human aspect as well, which is if at the point of purchase you don't have a face in the insurance company, I would argue that you're not on the journey to customer lifetime value, which we would probably say is our holy grail.
Right.
Is how can we get customers to buy more from us? And I think then that question my view would probably be you need to think of ways to bring in that human touch. Oh, here's your service team. It's John and Janet and someone else who are here for you, and you know, kind of doing that, kind of bring it to life, bring it to something behind just the brand, to the people that are helping to deliver on the promises. It's kind of where I think it's going to go.
Yeah,
you know?
I think it's going to expand beyond, say, like policy, right, or service team or interactive policies. I think, you know, this whole area of value-added services is going to be incredibly important. Whether you think of like medical, you know, health prevention and wellness, whether you think of, say, something like DigiHealth, right, your cyber health, into sort of more lifestyle things. So this aspect of value-added services, back to what you're saying, I think earlier in the conversation here about risk prevention. Right? How can I help you, right, have a better risk profile, whether that's your health, your physical assets, or your digital assets?
But so will a life insurance agent become a health and lifestyle coach, right?
Could be. Could be. Or they could plug you in, right? They could say, hey, look, Hugh, I got access to these great health services. Do you want to? You know, you just download the app and, you know, away you go.
I mean, at some level, shouldn't your personal trainer also be your life insurance agent or your health insurance agent at some level? Because they know what you're doing all the time. Yeah. I just see these sort of symbiotic relationships.
And wouldn't it be great to have an app where you could actually introduce your chosen coach into the app with your life insurance agent and your healthcare app, and then you can create
this is what I mean when I talk about the
ecosystems as well, right?
Yeah. And now you're symbiotic propositions. I love it.
But that's the way I think about this, right? The other thing I'm curious about is, and I love this idea of you saying, like, I mean, when you think about your position, right, as the chief digital business officer, in a way people may think so far removed, and as the CEO of a company may think so far removed. But the reality is, you just said, when I think about this proposition, I think about how would I want to be treated. In a way, it's really refreshing, I think, for people to hear that there's that level of thoughtfulness about what the product should be, what the interaction should be, right? Because there is a perception that big companies, insurance or not insurance, right, aren't thinking at that level. And this refreshing feeling of, would I want that call at 9:00 at night to sell me that thing? But you wouldn't, right?
No, I wouldn't.
It also means that your customers wouldn't, no matter where you sit in the value chain, right?
But what's happening, though, I think what's changed, right, with digital, right? I mean, we're also we demand, and rightly so, right? We demand a beautiful experience.
Yes.
And when I go online and I can't, you know, I can't tell if my date of birth should be year first, right, or year last, right?
Right.
And I'm sitting there and I try it 2 or 3 times, it doesn't work. Or, you know, the month day thing drives you nuts. Right. So I'm gone. I'm not.
You just leave.
I'm leaving. I'm not buying. And it's the same. If to do this successfully, and we've seen it in a number of partners in a number of markets, to do it successfully where it takes off, it's not the product. time and effort you spend on the customer experience in that app to get it right is what's critical. So it's table stakes.
I agree with that, and I think we are still at very, very early stages because, of course, we're digitising the front end first because that's where we have to.
Yeah.
But then there's all the rest that will come in, and the attention to detail, and then the ability to deploy the right suites of technology to allow a much more seamless move from digital to online agent to speaking to someone back again, and having that all coordinated is a big challenge for everyone, but particularly for larger insurers because we have the legacy to deal with. But that sort of middleware, as that comes into place, will actually enable a lot of this, and it will improve, I think, the experience and also the relationships that are built with customers. So technology is going to enable better relationships, essentially, I think.
We spent a lot of time talking about experiences, both of you have, right? How to make that experience seamless, how to make it more symbiotic. When you look at other ecosystems that already exist outside of insurance, do you use those as reference points to try to understand? Because in your own life, if you're buying from this company or selling to that company, doing all these other things and having a great experience, do you then think, how can we incorporate that into what we're doing? Because maybe our experience isn't there yet. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely right. Fast copiers,
should be
right? I mean, you know, and again, we're all.
What do you reference? Sorry. I'm curious.
Well, I mean, the two sources are your own experiences, right? So if, you know, particularly sort of e-commerce, right? It's just incredibly, I mean, that is table stakes for them as well, right?
That's the thing, right? Because they're interacting with that all day. I look at the place where I live and there are packages being delivered constantly, right? So people are comfortable with this. They do it all the time.
Yeah. So you look at that. You look at the experience on your phone, right? Whether it's, you know, Android or Apple. That's beautiful. Right. The other thing that's really important for us is you know, we don't come in with preconceived ideas. So our distribution partners are absolutely critical in this, right? And a number of them, right, they live in those digital verticals or those digital ecosystems, right? Whether you think, you know, banking or mobility or travel, healthcare, right? They're digital natives, right? And so the idea that I'm going to go in, right, and express my personal preferences about how they should, you know, do their customer experience. So, you know, back to you know what I was saying earlier in terms of the time and effort we spend getting the product into the customer experience. That's often driven by. I mean, it's the first thing you sit down with the partner and the customer experience they want to deliver. Right. Their ecosystem, their app. Right. The pain point we're trying to solve, and what you don't want to have happen is so that they're running great businesses. Right. They're running great businesses, and the last thing you want. Right, as we show up and say, oh, like we can provide all this value with an insurance transaction, right? And we drop in and we mess up the shopping cart experience or something, right? I mean, that's not going to work. So you have to sit down with the partner to go through this.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to know what that back and forth is like, right? Because embedded insurance is great, but if it's embedded in the wrong way, like you said, if it creates friction in that product sales, they're not going to want to do it, right?
So what it's like is it's a lot of pizza, it's a lot of Coke. And these whiteboards here would just be covered with squiggles and everything. I mean, it's just hard work, and it's people going through and building out these journeys, testing them, and just making sure they're so right.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time when I was at Goldman building out workflows because we couldn't build the technology without those workflows. Right. Wait, we forgot about this piece, kind of thing. Yeah. It felt like you wanted to jump in.
Well, I was going to slightly change the topic or expand the topic. So,
expand.
I think. I agree with all of that, but I think in some ecosystems, not all, and this is perhaps moving slightly beyond embedded insurance, I don't think we in the insurance industry have understood enough yet the power of content, right? So if we talk about megatrends, I think one of them is the power of content, so we can look at how pervasive social media has become for good and for bad, right? But actually content delivered to customers to help them to educate those customers so that they can make an informed decision, I think is really, really important. I think we can embrace our geekdom a little bit and start educating customers about what these products are, building relationships.
Get together in a room and talk about
through content as well. Now, that isn't going to be right for a lot of ecosystems, but I think it's an area that we're not traditionally very strong at.
Yeah. Like a great example is, part of the problem is a lot of insurance, right? I mean, you have to sell it. It's not bought. So to your point here, right? Customer, either legally you need to go and buy the insurance, right? Or you're making a compelling case to buy insurance. So for us, a great example to your point, I think, would you say like cyber insurance, and we would say, I think either for the individual or a business, right? In today's world, right? There's a risk, right, around if your payroll gets hacked, right? You can't provide your tax services, right? Or your phone gets hacked. But to Hugh's point, right, the awareness is not there. So we have to develop content to provide that awareness that yes, there are these risks, but there's also a solution for it.
I want to introduce something that's content related in my mind. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this and a lot of time talking about it. And I don't think this is going to go in the direction that you expect. We talked about this earlier in another conversation that I was having, and this idea of literacy, insurance literacy, financial literacy. We talk a lot about it, right? And most of that conversation, I'm really curious what both of you think about this, particularly in the context of producing content that will educate people so they can understand the products that they're interacting with better. But I feel like it's bifurcated, right? We think a lot about that because we're educated at other things, that we understand insurance well or financial services products well. But I think at some level, in the same experience you had with the car, you're like, I had to do all this research.
Right.
You know a lot about cars, but there's still things you don't know. And I would submit that there are a lot of things we don't know about financial services as well. So there's two levels. One is for people that know something about it, but don't know enough. And then for the completely underbanked, underserved, where that content that has to get delivered to them has to be completely different, right? Because they're starting at a different base level. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, the data that you can see on financial literacy is quite scary, right? There's an enormous amount we can do to improve financial literacy, and it becomes almost it's a CSR thing on one side, but actually it's a CSR thing with business intent as well. It's a good thing to do, and it's good for business. And this is a thing that we've actually been looking at, and we may well do something later this year or next year, is actually around this space. So we've been talking with an organisation that's a small startup that's developed a game, if you think of a Monopoly board, and that Monopoly board is about chances in life, and then things you can do. You earn a salary, you have an injury, or you can invest in the stock market. So it's about the financial health and the health and wellness aspects, and it's done on a digitised basis. But the key is it can also be played as a game, so that you can actually bring your friends and family into it. And the experience that we've seen people have on this is that they learn things through that gamification process, and they start to understand risk, right, for example, that's involved in life. And that's a fundamental thing to actually, that helps people to move forward. So I think there's some really interesting opportunities through digital means to actually address this issue of financial literacy.
I think maybe there's two answers to your challenge, Michael, I'd give. Right. One is, you mentioned the underserved, right? And I think digital gives you a chance to explain products, simple products, very clearly, right, in ways that are intuitive. So in Brazil, we're selling very simple life insurance, right, with 3 questions, and the value proposition is very clearly laid out, and it's simple. So I think simplicity is key. I think the other thing as well is sometimes we probably put it's almost back to front in terms of what we do, and what how we're trying to help the customer. Here's what I mean by that. If you have a home and you buy a homeowner's policy, yes, okay. If I have a flood, right, I'm going to pay, but back it up a bit, right? Because it's not just about, okay, great, my bank account gets the money. Think about all the other things that have happened, right? I have a business, right? My carpet's damaged. I've got to replace the carpet. Right. I could have mold in the floor. I've got to go down the road. I've got additional living expenses. I miss days of work. All these things happen. So an awareness of what could happen, I think, is really important. And I don't have to explain that in insurance terms. Even better yet, if I say, hey, Michael, if you were to put in some water shutoff valves, right, or water leak detectors, right, I've now completely changed the proposition, and then what you're saying is you put these preventative measures in, right, and if it doesn't work, oh, guess what? Okay, we'll be there to pay the claim, And so what you've now done, I think, is put the proposition, you've turned the proposition around a bit, but what you do need is the content, right? Back to raising the awareness and the understanding, right? And then, yes, insurance is there as a backstop.
And what we're seeing, obviously, with digital micro, and I think the advance of payment systems, right, is a way to get to people who previously wouldn't have been able to buy insurance because it just would have been too difficult, right? So that's another example where you've got also leveraging existing ecosystems, right? Whether that's the payment apps or whether it's the micro loan providers as well. There are not new opportunities there. And then I think if you present those propositions to people and they're affordable to them and they're understandable, then they'll make a choice just like everyone else does on whether they want it or not.
Right. So you're taking out a loan. Have you thought about, if you fall off the ladder and you can't work for 3 months, we can, and we do that in an embedded way, and we're there to protect and help you, if something happens. But you're doing it in a way it's not lots of paperwork, and you're doing it at a point where, your mind is thinking about it, and there's something there that's relevant and it's contextual.
Okay. Guys, this was awesome. Sean Ringsted, the Chief Digital Business Officer for Chubb, and Hugh Terry, the CEO and founder of the Digital Insurer. We're going to have both of you back. I feel like we left some stuff on the table.
We didn't get to many of the megatrends.
This was really
we didn't get to any megatrends, but
it was really good. And this is the kind of content I think that is going to really inform people as well and make them think about, or maybe rethink the way they think about their insurance, their coverage, and their protection. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.